Hello folks, I'm Caitríona, I'm a Baroque violinist, and this year for Early Music Day I'm exploring 5 of the mystery sonatas by 17th century composer Heinrich Biber, the ones that correspond to the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary. So today I'm going to try and share with you some of the thoughts and concepts that have been coming to mind for me while working on this music, and maybe what has informed the way I play them. If you're interested, for Early Music Day you'll be able to hear the full performance of these 5 sonatas from myself and my wonderful colleague James Taylor at the organ, playing from the Goldie Chapel in Nano Nagle Place in Cork. And we're hugely grateful to the Arts Council and the Irish Early Music Network for supporting the concert. So, the mystery sonatas are a set of 15 sonatas plus one final Passacaglia, and we're playing the 5 in the middle. So, the 6th corresponds to the Agony in the Garden, the 7th is the Scourging, the 8th the Crowning with the Thorns, the 9th is the Carrying of the Cross, and the 10th is the Crucifixion. So probably the thing which is the most at the forefront of my mind with this music is imagery. The reason the works are given these titles to do with the Rosary is to do with imagery, these engravings that are printed at the beginning of each sonata. And the impression that you get a lot of the time from this music, for me, is really like a Caravaggio painting. Everything is very up close and visceral, and nothing's really left at your sort of safe, reverent distance. And I'm sort of thinking about trying to do the same thing with the music. So some parts of these sonatas to me suggested imagery that was just so strong, like really cinematic. Like in the finale of the Carrying of the Cross, the 9th sonata, after the actual carrying part, the courant, which is the sort of moving music, travelling music, before we get to the last sonata, or the 10th sonata, the Crucifixion, we have this really ominous finale. And in this music, for me, I can really see the hills of Calvary sort of looming out of the fog, and Roman banners fluttering in the breeze and trumpets calling in the distance. And I think this is the moment when you really know what is going to happen, the tragedy of the story that is coming in the Crucifixion in the next sonata. The Crucifixion itself is probably one of the most played of these works, played by itself, and one of the most talked about. And there are definitely some parts of this sonata which really, again, suggest images from the story, particularly towards the end. For me, you can sort of hear the bits that sound like the veil of the temple ripping from side to side, and the earth begins to quake and the rocks split, raising the bodies of the saints, and all of this. But equally, there were things in these sonatas that completely puzzled me to begin with, because of how they don't fit in with these up close scenes. So looking, say, at the Scourging, which looks like it should be pretty violent music with the engraving and the story, and then it opens with this major sweet sounding allemande, which to my taste could only be played quite gently and delicately. It's just not what you expect. So for me, the place that I finally found a model that kind of clicked for me in this was in a much more played set of works on the life of Christ, which is Bach's Passions. Even though that's in the Lutheran tradition, the chorales that intersperse all the different scenes kind of helped me find this same mood or atmosphere. They're moments of reflection for me. You need these moments of reflection to go with the scenes of the Passion, or else there's no point. Like you get this in Bach as well, that the really sweetest chorales come directly with the scenes of the greatest suffering. But my modern sensibilities just took a very long time to be able to figure out that opposition. I don't think it's something that would be discordant at all to 17th or 18th century sensibilities, this idea that suffering and salvation go hand in hand. The other thing which is really interesting about these sonatas, and which is the second thing that you see at the beginning of every one, is the tuning indication. So these works are probably the most famous for scordatura violin mistuned. So we very rarely get things tuned in normal fifths of G, D, A, E. That only happens right at the very beginning and right at the very end of the set, and everything else changes the tuning of the violin in some way. And people talk a lot about the different possibilities that you can get with scordatura, which is true. You get a lot more possibilities for chords and double stops than you can with fifths, or a lot of different possibilities. But I think Biber's use of scordatura really goes quite far beyond that, and particularly for me, I saw that here in the Sorrowful Mysteries. But in the whole set, there's some scordatura that doesn't really need to be there. You could play the notes without it, or it can make things more difficult even. But what it does do is change the sound of the violin by changing the pitch of the strings. So again, particularly in this set, we get these really intense tunings for the violin. So the Crowning with the Thorns has the G string tuned up an entire fifth to a D, where the next string would normally be. And we normally give out about the different difficulty in changing pitch by a semitone, going between 440 hertz A or 442 and 415 hertz. Can be difficult enough to get your violin to do properly. And here I'm tuning the G string up by an entire fifth. The Scourging and the Carrying of the Cross both have the G string tuned up an entire fourth, goes as far as a C. And equally, the top strings are tuned down a lot. So the E string gets tuned down to a D or a C. And the physical effect that has on the violin is huge. And on the sound, the lower strings are very overstrung and they really blare out in the sound, and then the upper strings are much slacker than usual and they have much less resonance, much less ring to their sound. So for me, the changing sound of the violin in the different sonatas sort of prompted me to change a lot of the phrasing or the style that I might use if these were normally tuned pieces. It created two very different sound worlds. You have the option of playing kind of solidly, which gives the overtuned lower strings this quite harsh blare. Then when you get onto the upper strings, to get a sound out of them, you end up weighing quite heavily on them, which isn't the most genteel sound in the entire world. But this works, is what I eventually realised. After spending a lot of time angsting over trying to get a nice sound out of the violin the whole way across. This works because this is the earthy end of the imagery. Everything is rooted in dirt and blood in these parts of the music. For me, that you can't play anything subtly, but you can get this very harsh sounds like these mocking crowds or this movement of the mob. And then on the other hand, the other way that you can play and not get such a blare out of the lower strings is by barely touching them. They'll still respond. You'll get a sound out of them. They'll respond quite quickly, but you'll get quite an airy sound out of them, which you can get from the down-tuned upper strings as well. And that way of approaching the violin in this tuning kind of lifts the whole thing up off the earth. That takes us into that chorale realm of reflection, spiritual reflection, like in this Allemande that completely confused me, or in this sonata, everything is removed a little bit. There isn't any of the ugliness of human suffering that you get with the other sections of the music. And of course, I also have the advantage of my wonderful colleague, James Taylor at the organ, to support all of these ideas that I have with all of the different colours that we can get out of the chapel organ. So we were able to take everything up a notch in intensity from what we played for the joyful mysteries. We were able to use these really incredible contrasts with the sound of the organ, from these really delicate, airy flute stops for our spiritual reflections, to at the end of the Crucifixion with the earth shaking, literally pulling out all of the stops and getting every ounce of sound out of the organ that it would give, probably shaking the chapel quite a fair bit as well. So thanks a lot for listening to my thoughts and for coming on a little journey through this music with me. I hope you found something interesting in there. If you'd like to join us to hear the full performance of the Sorrowful Mysteries from the Goldie Chapel, that would be fantastic. And if you'd like to leave us a comment, we'd be delighted, or subscribe to the channel, sign up to our mailing list that is down in the description box below. And I hope to see you again soon.